Tonight, when your head hits the pillow, your brain will betray you. It will pick the most embarrassing thing you said in 2014. It will replay the conversation you had this morning and rewrite it 17 different ways. It will draft an email you are never going to send, then argue both sides of a decision you already made 3 weeks ago. You will lie there, exhausted, watching your own mind refuse to stop. And here is what nobody tells you. The reason this happens has almost nothing to do with stress. It is not a flaw in your personality. It is not anxiety in the clinical sense, though it can look like it. What is actually happening inside your skull at night is one of the most ancient and precisely engineered survival mechanisms your species has ever developed. And once you understand what it is actually doing, you will never think about sleeplessness the same way again. So, why can your brain simply not let go when the lights go out? During the day, your brain is busy. Your eyes are feeding it constant visual data. Your ears are parsing sounds. Your hands are touching things. Your body is moving through space. All of that sensory input occupies an enormous portion of your neural processing power, and it leaves very little bandwidth left over for the brain to turn inward and examine itself. But the moment you lie still and close your eyes, something changes. The flow of external input drops to almost nothing, and your brain, which has been running at full capacity since the moment you woke up, suddenly finds itself with an enormous amount of processing power and nowhere to put it. Neuroscientist Marcus Reichel at Washington University first mapped what happens in this moment in 2001. He discovered that when your brain is not focused on a task, it does not go quiet. It activates an entirely different set of regions he called the default mode network. Think of it as a second brain that runs in the background. This network lights up when you are daydreaming, when you are imagining the future, when you are reliving the past, when you are thinking about other people and how they see you. It is the part of your brain that makes you distinctly human, and it has been there, doing exactly this, for a very long time. Here is where it gets strange. Your ancestors did not sleep the way you sleep. For most of human history, people slept in two separate phases, with a period of quiet wakefulness in between. Historian Roger Ekirch of Virginia Tech spent 16 years combing through diaries, court records, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe and published his findings in 2001. He found overwhelming evidence that humans naturally woke for an hour or two in the middle of the night, lay quietly in the dark, and then fell back asleep for a second sleep. This in-between period was not considered a problem. People used it to pray, to have sex, to talk with whoever was beside them, and above all, to think. Your brain was built for those hours of stillness. The default mode network is not malfunctioning when it runs at night. It is doing exactly what it evolved to do during those quiet, dark, in-between hours. It is sorting. It is organizing. It is testing social scenarios, rehearsing difficult conversations, scanning the horizon of tomorrow for potential threats. And here is the thing about threats. Your brain does not distinguish very well between a predator crouching in the grass outside your cave and a difficult meeting you have scheduled for 9 in the morning. Both register in the same ancient system, both trigger the same cascade of neural activity, both get treated at the level of your oldest brain circuits as survival-critical information that needs to be processed right now. Psychologist Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan has studied what happens when the default mode network runs without any structure or direction. He calls this phenomenon chatter. Chatter is the voice in your head that loops the same thought repeatedly, examines it from every angle, catastrophizes outcomes, and refuses to reach a conclusion. It is not random. It has a very specific purpose, even though it feels pointless. Your brain is trying to achieve certainty in situations where certainty does not exist, and it will keep running the simulation until it finds an answer or exhausts itself. The problem is that most of the things your brain obsesses over at night are not the kind of problems that have clean answers. Did you say the wrong thing to your colleague? Is your relationship really okay? Are you making the right choices? These are open-ended questions that circle back on themselves. Your brain cannot solve them, but it cannot stop trying either, and so it runs them again, and again, and one more time, just in case. This is the loop you know. Now consider what your ancestors were actually doing in that quiet hour between first and second sleep. They were not lying awake spiraling. The darkness around them was not a metaphor for uncertainty. It was literal darkness, filled with real sounds, real animals, real physical threats. Their brains were running the same default mode network, scanning the same internal landscape, but they were doing it in a context where that scanning made complete evolutionary sense. You are doing the same thing in a world that no longer has the same threats. Your brain has not received the update. It is still working with ancient firmware. Here is what the research shows about what this does to you physically. When the default mode network activates under stress, it triggers a hormonal response. Cortisol, your primary stress hormone, begins to rise. In a normal, healthy sleep cycle, cortisol is supposed to be at its lowest point between midnight and 3 a.m. and begin rising naturally around 4 to 5 in the morning to wake you up. But when your mind races at night, it can trigger early cortisol spikes. Sleep researcher Matthew Walker at the University of California, Berkeley has documented how these spikes fragment your sleep architecture, robbing you specifically of slow-wave deep sleep, which is the phase your brain needs most urgently for memory consolidation and emotional regulation. In other words, the more you think at night, the less your brain can clean itself up, and the less it cleans itself up, the more reactive and threat-focused it becomes the next day, which means you arrive at the next bedtime with more unprocessed material than you had the night before. It compounds, and then something else happens. Something even more counterintuitive than everything you have heard so far. The harder you try to stop the thoughts, the louder they get. Daniel Wegner at Harvard ran a now-famous experiment in the 1980s that he called the white bear problem. He asked participants to try not to think about a white bear for 5 minutes. Every time they thought about the white bear, they had to ring a bell. They rang it constantly. And when the 5 minutes were up and they were allowed to think about whatever they wanted, they could not stop thinking about the white bear. The act of suppression had paradoxically amplified the thought. Your brain treats suppressed thoughts like unfinished business, and it is obsessive about unfinished business. Psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik documented in the 1920s that humans remember interrupted or incomplete tasks far better than completed ones. This became known as the Zeigarnik effect, and it explains with uncomfortable precision why the thought you most desperately want to push away is the one that comes back hardest. Your racing mind is not trying to hurt you. It is trying to finish something. Here is what actually works and why it works, in terms your ancient brain can understand. When you write the thought down, physically on paper, your brain registers it as externally stored. The threat of losing the information is neutralized. A 2011 study by psychologist E.J. Masacampo at Florida State found that when participants wrote down a specific plan for completing an unfinished task, the intrusive thoughts about that task dropped significantly, even though the task itself was still unfinished. The brain needed to know the thought had somewhere to go. Give your thoughts a container, and they stop demanding to live in your head. This is also why sleep rituals that involve the same sequence of actions every night are powerful. They are not relaxing you through magic. They are signaling to your default mode network that the day is over, the scanning can stop, and the threat assessment can be filed away until morning. The ritual is a message in a language older than words. Your brain wants to help you survive. It always has. Tonight, when the darkness comes and the thoughts begin to rise, remember what is actually happening. Your ancient brain is doing what it was built to do in the quiet hours. It is running simulations. It is scanning for danger. It is trying to protect something it loves, which is you. The goal is not to silence it. The goal is to let it know the work is done. And here is what it took you, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, to finally understand. The mind that races at 2 in the morning is the same mind that kept your ancestors alive in the dark. You are not broken. You are just ancient.